Really, I'll let you dig it out.
Yeah, but the frame is sitting on top of his head.
I can move the moose handle.
Okay. Well, you know what? I think this angle would be nice too. If I slide this chair, can you slide that chair
Yeah,
over?
he's a little bit. Steer, come forward in the chair a little bit.
Okay.
Push your butt up. There you go. Good. Yeah, you were lean. That chair is like that. It leans back.
Yeah. Well.
You like it lean back? How are you comfortable lean back?
No. Yeah. Not all that uncomfortable. No, it's not uncomfortable.
That's a well-worn chair.
They're crying.
Thing, you know. Yeah.
I'm filming you.
Yeah. So, yeah, we used to have a Christmas tree. And I can remember going out with Doug. He was about her size there. And I'd bring a little heater and some hot cocoa. And we'd go out in a blizzard. He wanted to go. And we had to have a Christmas tree. So we'd take off. And I'd bring in a little heater. We'd stand there underneath a fir tree and have hot cocoa, then cut a tree down and go home. Yes, we did.
That sounds like a fun time, huh, Allie?
Yeah.
Hot cocoa.
Yeah.
Outside.
Well, I used to get it so hot that Dougie could hardly, his lips would tremble as he'd, but we got it down. I can remember doing that half a dozen times when he was small.
Now, when your sisters decorated the tree when you were little, is all that was on the tree? Did you have any decorations or just popcorn?
Oh, no. We had, well, you don't have anything anywhere near the likes of what we used to have. They had balls, you know, and, different various ornaments, but nothing lighted.
Yeah.
Nothing lighted.
Nothing
and,
lighted.
We might have had a few lighted ones at the real last there before, but we was pretty well grown up then.
Did you ever put candles on a tree?
We had a few little gifts. A favorite one was a box of writing paper. You could get that at the dime store for a dime, and we'd exchange small gifts like that. And we thought it was great.
Do you remember any special toys from when you were little?
Not really. I never had any. Well, yeah, I think I got a small pair of skis that after a while they straightened down. They straightened out. They might have been not steamed enough, you know, to get a good bend. And I used to have to put them up against the clapboards of the house there. I'd wet them in hot water and then put them underneath the clapboards and so that they'd curve, you know. So I'd get a curve on the end. And they'd last like that for a few days, then I'd have to do it all over again. Needless to say, cheap skis.
How old were you?
7, 8, 9, 10. In that, I don't think that, I can remember one thing. They used to have a carnival, and our school was represented there. And like I say, I had a poor pair of skis, and I was supposed to jump. I could ski pretty good, but I put too much effort into it. And I can remember my teacher, Miss Boothby, to this day, when she saw me flying through the air and taking the header, of course, she laughed. She thought that was the funniest thing that had happened that day. And but I had done my best to participate in a jumping contest.
What happened? You just lost your balance?
No, I had poor skis. They were practically straight. And we couldn't just put in skis like you have today with the fancy harnesses. And we used to strap them with with the bindings with whatever we could, pieces of rope or not tires, but inner tubes, elastics. We'd make elastics with inner tubes, and we'd tie them onto our foot anywhere we could.
So would that go around the ski?
And that would, we participated in this little carnival, you know, the school carnival. And naturally, that equipment wasn't meant to be used. I put a big effort into this jump, and I landed probably on my nose, and Mrs. Boothby had a big kick out of that.
Did you have any sleds or anything like that?
Sleds?
Yeah.
I made most of my stuff. Wagons, little play wagons. I'd find a couple of wheels someplace, and with piece of 2x4s, and I'd make a wagon and have a great time with it. But I never did have a nice little red wagon like.
Well, we have one out in the garage you can play with tomorrow. You can go out and play with it tomorrow.
Okay.
It's a big one. Right, Allie? Allie's smiling.
Yeah, isn't that something, though? Huh? Today, what we take for granted, you know, come hard. You just didn't have these. Well, I look around me and I'm flabbergasted by that little truck there would have sent me to high heavens. It really would have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have anything made out of plastic?
There was no such things in that day. Plastic, I don't think was even thought of at the time.
Do you remember the first plastic thing?
Not really, but I can't remember plastic toys and stuff like that.
What about plastic bottles? When the glass bottles went to plastic?
No, I used to be a professional bottle collector. I say professional. I would scour the neighborhood and find pint bottles that drunkards had tossed away, and I'd sell those for 5 cents a piece back to the liquor dealer.
How old were you then?
8, 9, 10, 11. 5 cents would take us into the movies.
Yeah.
And so if I could find, I usually come pretty close to, there was a lot of drinking in those days. This was before Prohibition. And everybody had their supply of booze, and they tossed the bottles away, and we'd collect them and sell them back to them.
Do you remember Prohibition?
Oh, I guess.
How old were you?
Well, I was 12, 15. When did they take that off? In there.
So it was in the 20s.
Yes. I can't remember the year. Now I should because I lived through it. But and I can remember the rum runners. We used to do a lot of searching in the neighborhood for their hiding places. One person next door to us there was elderberry bushes in the back of his home. And he had a lot of little paths in through there, like a maze. And he'd hide his booze in there. And us kids used to be able to ferret that out like hound dogs. We'd go down one path to the next, and we'd eventually find his hiding places.
And then what would you do?
Should I tell this?
Yeah.
What would we do? We'd take part of his hiding And, well, they were professional booze sellers. And we'd sell them to whoever, some youngster that didn't have quite the money to buy from the liquor dealer, and we'd sell them to him.
And that's during Prohibition or at a different time?
Before Prohibition.
Oh, okay.
While Prohibition, well, when it was illegal to have liquor.
When it was illegal to have liquor?
Oh, yeah.
And what would they do if they found you had liquor?
You went in a who's car. Oh, yes, they used to pull raids all of the time. And I can remember one person had a cow. They used to make the alcohol. And we'd see him crossing out. We had a garden plot there. And he took a shortcut through the garden and delivered to a store 2-quart bottles of milk, what we thought was milk, if they were painted white. But they were alcohol that he brought to the store, and the store owner would sell them to his customers.
So do you remember how many years that lasted?
Oh, that all during my early in the 20s to the early 30s there, that lasted. And then after that, Prohibition was off, and it was illegal to drink.
Do you remember anything about it, like why they made it illegal and why they made it legal again?
I didn't get that.
Do you remember why they made it illegal and why they made it legal again?
Well, yes, there was so much unrest and the rebellion against the people. Well, bootleggers were running the government ragged, for one thing, with their Al Capone. You remember talking about him and Babyface Nelson and all of those gangsters dealt in alcohol, and then when they had to find other sources of, so they went to drugs after the alcohol became legal to buy.
Do you think they should make drugs legal?
I didn't get that, I'm sorry.
Do you think they should make drugs legal?
They're spending billions of dollars trying to, and the more they spend, seems so the more they produce. Probably they should spend more money in treating dope addicts than they should try to put them in jail.
Put what in jail?
See, right now,
Who sell drugs
you get
and
caught
take
with
drugs.
marijuana or morphine or whatever have you, any crack, and they go all out to throw you in jail rather than treat you and see if they can't. It costs more to put you in jail than it would to treat you. So probably they might eventually legalize it, same as they did with liquor. That's merely my opinion, but for what it's worth.
All right. What did I ask you last time first?
Oh,
What's your full name?
my name is Sir W. Fraser.
What's the W stand for?
William.
How'd you get the name Sear?
Well, that's a little story in itself. There was a Canadian strongman at the time in the last of the 1800s and the first of the 1900s. And my father admired him. His name was Louis. He performed different feats of strength. He was supposed to be the world's strongest man at that time. So my father thought that I should bear his name.
And what was your father's name?
Edward.
And what was your mother's name?
Victoria St. Pierre,
And what year were you born?
1914.
What's your exact birthday?
1913.
Okay.
Yeah,
On what day in 1913?
yes.
Were you born? What month and day?
January 24th, 1914. Yeah, you want my birthday?
Yes.
January 24th, 1913.
Do you know what was going on in the world at that time?
Well, yes, World War I
Oh, really?
was brewing, and we entered in 1918.
Did you know anybody who had been in World War I?
Yes, there was a family next door by the name of Rubishaw and Lefevres, and they were young men and went to war in World War I.
And where was that located?
The war
Yeah.
in Europe, Germany, France primarily. France, Belgium,
How did they get there?
by ship.
Were there planes at that time?
Little Piper plane, little one-seater and two-seaters, but that was the beginning of the air wars. Was World War I, really, but they were small planes at the time.
And
Before it got through, before the war got through, they was using bigger planes. They developed the bigger planes.
do you know what the fight was about for World War I?
Well, yes, there was a king either that was killed, that was assassinated. The Germans used for an excuse, and I can't remember his name, but that was an excuse to start with. And France had been making progress in the world affairs, and the Germans thought that they'd take part of it. Alsace-Lorraine was the part of Germany that the French had, and they wanted back, that had been over the years had been won from Germany.
And what year did that war end? Do you remember?
Pardon?
Do you remember what year the war ended?
1918.
How old were you then?
All right. Sure. Let me see. I was about 5 or 6 years old.
And where did you live?
In Rumford, Maine.
Do you remember your address?
Oh yeah, 242 Stratford Avenue, Rumford.
And is that the place you were born?
No, I was born on a farm in actually in Rumford, on the outskirts of Rumford, but in a farmland. They called the place Burgess Hill, and that's where I was born.
And did you have brothers and sisters?
There was 8 of us in the family. Yeah.
Where did you fall? Were you the youngest or the oldest?
I was second to the youngest. I had a younger sister.
Can you name off your siblings from the oldest?
Yes. Antoinette was the eldest, and Lumina was the second in line. Then Germaine, Colombe, Venise, and I had a brother by the name of Henry, and then myself and my youngest sister Louise.
And were they all born at that farm?
Well, I don't think so, but I I wouldn't hazard a guess where they were born, really. I don't think that Antoinette and Lumina and Jermaine, I don't think they were born there. They might have been born in the Rumford proper, not on the farm. Rest of us must have been born on the farm.
So when did you move to the farm? Before you were born, they moved there?
No, I think I was born on the farm. But, yeah.
But they didn't live there before?
But I must have been the baby when they moved there.
Yeah.
And then I had a younger sister born when we lived on the farm.
Yeah. I wonder where they lived before.
That's a good question. I really don't know.
No.
Yes, I do know. They lived near Stratford Avenue. We had a piece of land there and a 2-tenement block. And my father and mother operated a store in the basement of that 2-tenement block where we live. And then they decided to sell out and buy a farm. And that's when we made that the move to the farm. But my mother died while we were on the farm, and we had been there just a short while. And Louise, the baby, was born, and 3 months after she was born, my mother passed away.
What did she die from?
Well, that's a good question. She just went to bed one afternoon with with my baby sister, and told my two elder sister that wake her up when they heard my father's team coming up the hill, and that she'd start preparing supper. But when they went to wake her up, she had passed away.
And what did they do?
Well, they bundled all of us kids, the rest of the kids, up, and it was a cold winter night, and they started down the hill to a neighbor's. But they met my father and his team coming up to cut the hill to the farm. He was through his day's work, but it was really dark in the wintertime, early enough, but dark. And he says, "What are you kids doing on the road at this time?" They said, my two eldest sisters told him that my mother had passed away, but he brought us back home, and from then on it was a matter of funerals and stuff like that. And he decided he couldn't cope with the farm and 8 kids, so he sold the farm out. He got rid of the farm and moved and rebuilt a house at the Stratford Avenue. We had a little barn there that he converted into a house. And, well, I was probably 4 or 5 before we moved there.
How did he take care of the baby after your mother passed away? Well, I guess my 2 elder sisters did most of the caring, and quite a few number of our relatives wanted to adopt the baby, but he didn't want any part of that. My dad wanted to hold the family together. And did he tell you any stories of how you helped in the night?
Well, he at one time when he reminiscing about when we lived on a farm, he told me a little story that we used to sleep, my brother and my dad used to sleep in one room. It was a small farmhouse. And during the wintertime, we slept together. And he had the baby's crib, Louise's crib, right next to his head of the bed. Whenever she woke up during the night, he'd get up and go warm up milk. And one night while he was warming up and the baby was crying, I was supposed to have, I was about 2 years old, but I had sat on the edge of the bed
and rocked the cradle while he was warming, and he discovered me sitting there rubbing my eyes and rocking the cradle. It made him feel a little bit sad at the time.
Probably proud of you.
Well, at 2 years old, I had seen him rocking the baby to sleep often enough that I wanted her to put her to sleep, and so I must have. I can't remember this, but that's the story he told me.
Did you have electricity?
Not there, no.
So how did he heat the bottle?
He had a fire going in a kitchen stove, and hot water. He just put the bottle in there, I assume, and heated the bottle that way.
And what kind of milk was it? Was it formula?
Oh boy, I doubt very much if it was formula. It was cow's milk, such as it come from the cow.
And did you have cows?
Oh yes, we had probably half a dozen to a dozen cows. I can't remember, but I do know that from stories that he said, told us that he had about a dozen cows, plus the job that he was doing at the mill.
What did he do at the mill? What did he do for work?
Well, he had a team of horses, and he hired those out to the mill, and they made him do various jobs.
Did he milk cows?
And then when he came home from working all day long at the mill, he milked the cows, fed them, bedded them down, got them ready for the night, fixed the milk, and then after he had his supper, or whether he had to get up in the morning, feed his team, and milk the cows again, fed them for the day, or turn them loose out in the pasture, and then went to work with the mill, at the mill with his team.
Who made you dinner?
Pardon?
Who made your dinner?
My sisters, apparently.
And
But like I say, we didn't live on the farm. But we never had a housekeeper. So I assumed that he made most of the meals after my mother passed away. I know he made all of the meals. But he used to prepare it and tell the girls, well, peel potatoes, and he'd bring home the meats that we was going to have, and the vegetables. And
what kind of meat did you eat in those days?
oh boy, probably a lot of hamburger and frankfurters, which was cheap then.
Yeah.
And
Did you use butter?
not really. Well, we had all the butter we could use, I suppose, because of the, having the cows. And but I can remember my sisters mixing up margarine.
What was that like?
It was disgusting. It was like pure lard. And there was a capsule, a plastic capsule with a dye in it. And they'd break that open and put it on that pound of lard or fat. I have since read that whale oil used to be used for margarine, and various types of oil used to be used for margarine. And they'd mix it up, and it was pure white, and that capsule with the dye in it would make it look like butter. They had to work that in and salt it to taste, but it still didn't taste right. That's what we had. But on the farm, we had real butter, I would assume.
And did they go to school during the day?
Yes, there was 1, 2, 3 that went down Burgess Hill that I refer to, and at the bottom of that hill, within probably a couple, 200-300 yards, was a Kimball School. And the girls went to that school. They were old enough to go to school. The rest of us was at home.
So who took care of you then?
Good question. I can't remember. I don't know just what arrangement they had, but I do know that some of them went to that Kimball school, and probably the next in line kept the kids.
How old would they have been?
Probably school age.
Yeah.
It could have been Antoinette. She was the eldest.
How old was she when your mother passed away?
I think she was about 12, 13.
And then how long did she go to school?
They, after we moved to Rumford, she and Lumina moved to Lewiston as young girls and worked at the the St. Mary's Hospital. And while it was a token, they got nothing. They got their board and room, and they answered the phone and did little odd jobs. And then when they lived there till they was eligible to go to work, and they went to work in woolen mills and cotton mills of Lewiston.
How old were they when they left for that, do you think?
Well, they left before they were eligible to go to work because they went to St. Mary's and stayed there and had preliminary school there at St. Mary, plus their work that they had to do. And Antoinette, at 19, contacted TB, and she passed away.
Tuberculosis.
Yeah, TB.
Now, how long was she sick with that?
I really don't know, but I vaguely remember her being in Hebron Sanitarium, and then she moved to Fairfield Sanitarium, where she died.
At 19?
And at 19, and I think I was about 8 or 9 years old at the time. I can remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, Sear.
So am I.
The baby.
Yes.
Of all times.
Hi.
So how did everybody deal with that?
With
her passing away?
Well, I can remember my father being quite. I guess she was one of his favorites. She could wheedle the money out of him to go buy herself a new hat. He'd give her money to buy hats for her and Lumina. Mm-hmm. And that's the story that they tell me. My sisters would tell. But she'd see a hat that was more than half of what they had given them. Then she had to talk Lumina, who was an easygoing one, out of her some of her share of the money, so she could buy the better bonnet. And Minnie would end up with a scruffy-looking hat, and they'd come home, and Antoinette had a stylish little hat, and Lumina would have the rest of the money and not a very nice hat. And my father used to say, "You did it again." He knew she could talk Minnie out of most anything, you know. But that was kids.
So then did Minnie stayed in Lewiston?
Yes, Minnie stayed after Antoinette's, and she worked at the Bleachy, which was a cotton mill, that is the finished sheets there, a sheet mill. Mm-hmm. And she worked there for something like 35, 40 years.
along with other sisters of mine that migrated to Lewiston.
Did all your sisters migrate to Lewiston?
Yes, they did. Really nothing in Rumford that, except the Oxford Paper Company, that would pay a living wage. So when Minnie said, well, come to Lewiston, you can get a job at the bleachery. And they, one by one, Colombe went, Colombe went, and Jermaine went, and they all got jobs in Lewiston. And then Venise stayed a good while because she was more or less looking after Louise, my younger sibling. And but there came a time when she too moved to Lewiston and got a job. And Louise Louise and I were the last two at home. And I was about 17, 18, and no work. And when I got to be about 20, I decided, Louise, in the meantime, moved to Lewiston. And that was, I was left with my dad. Henry had moved to Portland and got a job in Portland.
What did he do?
In Portland?
Yeah.
He worked at the state drugstore as a clerk, I guess. I used to take the interurban out of Lewiston, and I'd come to Lewiston from Rumford, take the interurban there for $1, and go to visit with him in Portland, then come back, stop in Lewiston, then go back to Rumford. I was the last one home.
What's the interurban?
It was a one-car train that run along the, I can't remember the route number there, but yeah, the interurban was an electric car train, and it used to make a fast trip to Portland 2-3 times a day.
Why did it stop?
Oh, it stopped at New Gloucester, Gray, and other places I can't remember, but New Gloucester and Gray. Well, it stopped in Auburn to begin with, originated out of Lewiston, and stopped in Auburn, picked up New Gloucester, right into Portland.
Do you remember what years that ran?
Sure, I think before I went in the Army. This was in early 30s, the late 20s, early 30s, 1930.
And when did you leave Rumford?
1932, I joined the Army. I went to Vermont. I was, originally I had thought of going to Hawaiian Islands to, well, I can't remember the name of the fort out there, but I had friends out in Hawaii, and I was going to go join them. But there was no openings that particular month. And when I asked him where there were openings, he says, well, we got a couple of openings in Vermont in a field artillery or the cavalry, and I liked horses, so I says, I'll take the cavalry. And that's where I landed for 3 years.
Now, where was that?
In Vermont, Fort Ethan Allen, Vermont, not too far from Burlington.
And what did you do on the horses?
Oh, we trained the old-fashioned way, sabers, but the cavalry was really beginning to be phased out. So by the time I'd spent my 3 years in cavalry, they were beginning to phase. They really phased it out right after I got out.
So there were no more horses?
There was, there was. Oh, when I left there, they still had 2 barnfuls of horses
Each band held about 100 horses apiece. And the field artillery had bigger horses. And they lived, they were a separate unit from the cavalry.
What did they do after the horses? Did they stop the cavalry?
They mechanized. They got rid of the horses, and they started to go to trucks and tanks, and such as they are today.
And then what did they call it?
The mechanized cavalry. Still do, I think.
And what year was that?
Well, I would say that they phased it out of 40th, from 40th and Allen. I would say that probably in 1937, 38.
Please stop jumping on that because it's bouncing the camera.
Got discharged in 36. And I would say that they really phased out the cavalry, got rid of the horses, and probably went to tanks and weapons carriers, trucks and the likes after that. Underhill, Vermont.
Did the cavalry move around?
Yes, we used to go. This used to be our camping area. We used to go out on maneuvers up there. And you can see we used to set up our tents there and stay at Underhill. There was a farm not too far from there. And after we get through our day's training, we used to go to that farm, and the lady would sell us a strawberry shortcake, great big piece of strawberry shortcake for 25 cents. So, needless to say, she had a line of soldiers there practically every night.
For the strawberry
Oh, you still? I thought you was gone with the kids. Yeah.
No, Daddy took them.
Yeah. So that's a tent, a pyramid tent that we used to have pup tents, but that we carried on our packs on the horses. But these tents were what did they call those? Pyramid type tents, and they slept six. So that's where we stayed. This was taken. I can't read that, but
it says 40th and Allen in August 1934.
In 34, yeah. That. Did you have another one?
Okay.
Yeah. See, this is the kitchen, and all the men in line to have their dinner or breakfast, whatever it might have been. This was also taken in Underhill, in Vermont, at Underhill.
And what did they usually cook you for food?
Oh, we had good food. That is, you know what it cost us at that time? 32 cents a day. It would feed a soldier a real good diet. And we have pork chops, beef, and bacon and eggs. We had a good diet. Well, I had a hat on. I wish I could point it out to you. I readily show it to you, but I can't pick it out anymore. But I remember those pictures being taken, and I've had them hanging around for many years. What
happened to the horses?
Not really. They had a movie, and my son Douglas, that lives in Utah, gave me a copy of that movie to play on tape.
Yeah. And
it showed the cavalry being at Fort Riley, Kansas. They would dig great holes into the earth, and they were sitting on the side of of the hole with a 50 caliber machine gun, and when probably 25 horses would be down where the Caterpillar tractors had dug these great holes, they were shot. And they showed us, there's a group of men that says, nothing doing. We ain't going to put up with this. These horses deserve better than that. And there's a young lieutenant and a squad of men took the rest of the horses and started out towards Montana with them. From Fort Riley, Kansas, they skirted the law all the way out to to Montana, and then the Army was after them. They wanted to dispose of those horses, but that lieutenant and that squad of men were determined that they weren't going to shoot them that way. And they finally got to Montana with that roughly 150 horses, and they had to shoot some on the way because they wore out and were too old. So they disposed of them such as they had to because they were sickly. But they got them to Montana, and then the Army was closing in on them, and they crossed the line into Canada. And the Canadians gave them refuge in Canada. And I believe this to be true, and it was, I've got the tape at home.
So he was the one who had to drive them into the hole to get the machine gun?
Yes.
And he decided to drive them away?
He decided that he couldn't stand it. He said these horses deserve better than this after having served the Army for so many years.
So how many did he drive north?
Well, I would say, I can't remember, but it looked like a herd of about 150. The remainder that was at Fort Riley, Kansas. Fort Riley, Kansas was also a cavalry post. And this was in the 30s. This actually happened. General MacArthur was the chief of, let me see, how would I put that? He didn't want to spend the money to feed those horses anymore. And he says, dispose of them. And they chose to dig holes in the ground and kill them that way. But this young lieutenant wouldn't, ran away with his squad. They took off and went to Montana. I guess they were a period of weeks going up there. They camped out. How they managed there to get their food, but the horses were no problem. They ate along the way. They stopped nights and grazed them. And I guess they made provision. Well, there was you would I'll take the tape down and show you, let you play it.
You lived on the farm.
Yes.
Did you have running water?
No, I think no. Like I say, I was 2 years old, but knowing farms in those days, no running water, no bathroom. There was outhouses, as you probably know what an outhouse is.
Tell me about it.
Tell you about. Well, there were outhouses for years. Wherever there's no running water, and the farm, they have a place in a stable, in a barn, that is set off from the other, and there's a two-holer there that you use to go to the toilet.
What does a two-holer mean?
Two holes cut in the board and set over a hole, and you use it as a toilet.
Why do you need two holes?
Well, man and wife probably went to went to the toilet at the same time, or two sisters, or two brothers for that matter. Any combinations. But they usually had, it was usually two holers. I can't remember ever seeing any more than two. Yes, I did. In the Army, when we were on the firing line, they used to have a number of holes. We'd get off the firing line and had to go to the toilet. There we went. It was a tent and probably a six-holer.
What's a firing line?
Well, where we shot, learned to shoot the rifle.
Okay.
This was out in the country, so there was no facilities to go to the toilet, and they had to provide a place for the men to go to the toilet. So they dug trenches there and built a two-holer or a three-holer or whatever over the hole.
And how did they just then move it and fill it with dirt, or did they have to?
That's correct. Yeah. After you use it, after the shooting season had ended, they would bury that, and the next year, when they'd use another area.
Did it get smelly in the summer?
It was pretty terrible in the summer. They'd stop for lunch and have lunch, and then we'd have to go to the toilet, and we'd have to use those two holers. But they did the best they could with. They put chemicals there to try to kill the smell, but the sun was hot, and it was hot, and it wasn't a very pleasant place to be.
What about on the farm when you grew up? You said it was in the barn?
That's correct.
Why was it in the barn?
Well, you couldn't dig a hole in the house, so you had it in, usually from the barn, from the house, there was an L building to go to the barn, and that's usually where these toilet facilities were located. And this was clean. You'd back up there with a wagon every now and again and clean this mess out and cut it away and put chemicals all in through there to make it more palatable. And that's the facilities we had. There was no, in camp, we had when we was at Underhill there, we had the same facility. Outdoor, dig a trench, put a tent over it, and build the facility to sit down and go to the toilet.
And how did they do the cooking?
They had special stoves that they carried with them. We used to, while I was in the cavalry, they used to send a wagon with a four mule team with all the kitchen supplies. And they'd start off, they'd feed you your breakfast, then they'd pack up everything and take off and go to our next destination, which was probably 20 miles away. And they'd get there and they'd set up the kitchen again, a tent, and portable stoves, and they did a pretty good job of cooking.
How often did you move with the cavalry?
How often
How often did you have to move to different camps?
This was just maneuvers during the summertime that we moved from one area to the next. When we was at 40th and Allen, we stayed put. We had permanent buildings, and permanent barracks, and permanent stables for the horses. But in the summertime, when we went out on maneuvers, we'd move from one area to the next. I can remember going from Lake Champlain, New York. We piled all our horses onto a ferry. We rode out to Champlain and took the ferry there,
and crossed over into New York. And we went to Camp Drum there in New York, upstate New York, and maneuvered there. And then came back 2-3 weeks later, took the same ferry back into Vermont and back to Fort Ethan Allen.
What were the maneuvers?
That's what I mean. Maneuvers was tactics of war, how to go about to defeat your enemy. Horse cavalry was really behind the times, but they, like I say, they were big. Not while I was there. The only thing that modernized that while I was still in there was that they bought a brand new Ford truck, panel truck for the kitchen. It would facilitate the kitchen moving from one area to maneuvers, you know, to another, and prepare when we get to in camp that night. Our supper would all be prepared. We took care of our horses, rubbed them down, took the saddle bridle off, put them on the picket line, and fed them a portion of grain and hay, and then we went to eat. We never ate until our horses were rubbed down, and we rubbed their legs down. They'd been ridden for 25, 30 miles that day, so they were hot on horse. And then we'd rub their backs and brush them down, and so they'd be nice and clean. Then we'd water them, feed them, and then we'd go and wash up ourselves if we weren't too tired. And sometimes we didn't wash, but we went and had our supper anyway.
Now the kitchen people, you said they originally took a wagon?
Yeah, with four mule or 4 horses usually. And they had all the kitchen utensils in there. And they had to travel before. Sometimes they got to camp after we got there. And we had to wait for supper. But once we got that Ford truck, they had everything arranged, that the stove, the portable stoves that they had, and pots and pans, they'd pile it onto that truck, and they would be to our next maneuvers, our next camping area, long before we were, and they could prepare a good meal.
Was that the first mechanical thing they got for the cavalry?
Yes, that I can remember, was that truck. After that, I can't tell you just exactly when they started making a bigger move, but they did phase them out right after that. Because there was a period of, from the time I got out till 1941, when I went back in, World War II, that's the time that they really modernized the cavalry.
And did they have running water at your barracks at Fort Ethan Allen?
Oh yeah, oh yes. We had all the facilities, nice toilets. Yeah, we had good barracks there, nice brick barracks with a great front veranda, porch, and it was quite. Now I think they've turned it into old people's homes and different. Has nothing more to do with the Army. I guess the Army turned that over to the Essex Junction, or where we were closest town, and they modernized it and made home. There was a lot of homes there for officers, but we had big barracks.
Now, in the farm you grew up on,
yes,
you had no electricity.
No.
What did you use for light?
Well, you probably just plain kerosene lamps. They shed about as much light. How modern can you be that you never saw this stuff?
you'd be amazed what people used to get by with. Wooden stove, we'd have to start the fire with kerosene, pour kerosene on the kindling wood, throw a match in there, and start your fire. And if you wanted hot water, you had to put a kettle on a not quite primitive. And Saturdays, if you wanted to bathe, which I've got pictures of myself and my brother, and we was spick and span. My mother had our clothes pressed and white as it could be. And she had to do it with a hot iron that she heated on the stove and with a scrub brush. No such a thing as hot running water. And
how would she do wash?
Well, usually, quite often, the stoves in those days had a tank connected to the stove, and you'd keep that full of hot water. You'd keep that full of water, and whenever your stove was heating, it would also heat that water, and you'd have a steady supply of hot water, just so long as your stove was burning, and you kept the well filled with water.
Where was the well located?
Out in the front yard, usually.
So how'd you get the water?
Well, not from what I know about this farm, but from other farms that I visited and stopped. Usually it was in the front yard, and they had a well there, and you just, with a bucket, you drop it down tied to a rope, you dropped it down into the well, filled the bucket, and pulled it up, and brought it into the house.
Did you ever live in a house with a hand pump?
Yes, I lived in them. I didn't. When I worked for the Central Maine Power, I used to stop at different farms at night, and there was facilities, pumps like that.
What did you do for Central Maine Power?
I inspected, to begin with, I was an apprentice lineman. And after about a year, I became a patrolman or a line inspector. These high-tension volt lines that cross-country. I used to walk from Lewiston to Bingham. Then from Bingham, I'd walk down to Bucksport, inspecting the lines as I went along. When I got to Bucksport, I used to go to take a bus into Bangor and take the Flying Yankee out of Bangor back home to Lewiston, and I was back home for 3 days. Then I'd make the trip all over again.
What's the Flying Yankee?
Flying Yankee was a really modern plane for the time. You never knew of the Flying Yankee? Of course not. You're only 36, and this is before your time. But this Flying Yankee was an all aluminum plane built like a bullet. And they called it the Flying Yankee. And it originated out of Bangor roughly to Augusta, to Lewiston, and to Portland, to Boston. And I used to take it out of Bangor through to Augusta and into Lewiston, and there I stayed home for 3 days.
How old were you then?
Oh, I was probably 26, 27.
How many miles did you walk a week or a day?
200 miles, about 20 miles a day, cross country. On snowshoes in the wintertime, and through the bushes during the summertime.
Where did you sleep?
If my 20 miles,
finished up in Livermore, for instance, I'd stay in the motel. In Farmington, I stayed at the Brick Inn. In Madison, I used to stay at the Madison House, and I'd eat at restaurants at the expense of the CMP. And some nights, I wouldn't hit any town, but I'd search out a farm. I prearranged, mind you. This was prearranged. And I'd stop at the farm overnight, and I'd pay the lady $1 for my bed and 50 cents a meal. And she'd put up a lunch for me the next day, and I'd take off to go to my next destination.
How did you get into that work?
Well, as I say, I was an apprentice lineman, and I was making all of $16 a week. And when this job job opening came, it paid. There was a $9 increase in salary, plus all my expenses. So.
What year was that?
That was in 1937. 37 to 41. And I was living high off the hog. I was making over $25 a week. And all my expenses paid. So.
What did you do for fun in those days?
At that time, well, do you really want to know? I went out with, in Bingham, for instance, there was a fellow, a bus driver from Portland that used to stop overnight at the same hotel that I did. And he had his car up there, so he was at loose ends nights. He didn't know what to do. And so when I'd get there I was in Bingham Friday and Saturday. Sunday morning, I'd leave Bingham to go towards Bucksport. So we'd go to different dances. I had a set of clothes at the motel where I stayed. And this Mrs. Dutton, the hotel manager, would put my clothes away. I'd leave it in my room and put on my work clothes and take off, and she'd put my clothes away till I came the following week.
And why did you stay in that town 2 days?
Because one day I worked backwards. I didn't want to stay in Solon. So I'd get up to Solon and take the bus from there into Bingham. The next day, I would go from Bingham back to Solon, and that would complete my patrol. Then I'd take the bus back to Bingham, and the next morning I would take off for Athens and points east.
You need a drink of water? For how many years did you do that?
From 37 to 41.
And what did you do in 41?
I went in the Army. They called me back in.
Where did you go with that?
I went to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, as in the engineers. And when I got there, while I was in the cavalry, I had been made corporal. So I kept my same rank when I went into Fort Belvoir. And then I made platoon sergeant, and they kept me in Fort Belvoir, Virginia, training men. And I was there for roughly three years and some odd, and just training one group after another, and sending them overseas to various places. And after I'd been there for that length of time, they decided that they had better send me. They sent me to China.
Where in China?
Well, I went to Shanghai, but I was on the Kunming. I was on the Vietnamese border, Kunming, China. And I was there for a year, also training men and doing engineer type work. I was in charge of a water filtration plant. Well, I erected it and operated it for the, well, I had half a dozen men, and we operated that water filtration plant in Kunming till the atomic bomb was dropped. And then they sent me to Shanghai. I flew from Kunming to Shanghai, and from Shanghai into Seattle, Washington, and home.
Why did they have you filtering water?
So we have drinking water. We not only filtered it, but we mixed it with chlorine through pumps and various machinery. And we distributed it to various campsites. We had 2-3 trucks, which was under my jurisdiction, and we'd send, they had their routes and they delivered their water. And I just stayed at the plant with a couple of men and operated. We had a brook running down there, and we took the water from the brook, filtered it, mixed it with chlorine, then sent it out to be, and it wasn't fit to be drank in that manner. We always warned them that they still had to boil it.
So, were there people living in that place where you were filtering
Kunming?
the water?
Yes. Yes, there was a little, Kunming was, Gunheitsa.
Were they drinking the
Yeah,
water?
Kunming was a pretty good, fair-sized city on not too far from Vietnam. But where I live, in the campsite that I live, it was all mud brick housing. But they were fairly decent barracks. And we lived there, and we did we had a main dining area. We went down to the dining area to eat, and we had to cross this little town of Gunheitsa. Our campsite was here, Gunheitsa was here, and our kitchen facilities, why they did it that way, was on the other side of Gunheitsa. And we'd walk through this little town every morning on our way to breakfast.
What was it like?
Well, it was quite something. Pigs running around, little babies with a little slit in the back of their trousers, so they could squat you'd see their little butt in that slit, and they squatted wherever they happened to need to go to the toilet. They just squat there and went to the toilet. I'm talking about little shahaitzes, little kids then. And we'd cross this little village and go eat, then go back and do our day's work.
Where did the grown-ups in that country go to the bathroom? Where did the grown-ups go to the bathroom?
That is another thing. They used to, any place they could. In the morning, you'd see peasants with 2 baskets, one on either end of the pole. And they'd carry that around, and they'd come to night fertilizer, they called it. Somebody had done their duty during the night. They scooped that up, and they'd put that in their basket and use that in their garden.
And where did they drink water from?
The same source we did, only it wasn't filtered. They went up the line a little ways from where we were, from where the plant was, and they took their water from there.
Did it make them sick?
Apparently not. but I don't understand why, because it was yellow and brackish, and it didn't look too appetizing. They used to wash their trucks there. We used to have to squabble with them all of the time about washing their truck above the filtration plant. They should have taken it, we should have put the plant up beyond, above their truck washing area. But it didn't always work out the way we wanted to.
Do you remember your trip from Virginia to China?
Oh yes, very well. I went to Seattle, Washington, no, California, San Francisco by plane.
Okay.
And then I went to Sacramento and to Marysville, and there was a Camp Beale up there, and we stayed there. We was going to stay there for a month. So when I discovered that we was going to stay there for a month, I told my wife at the time, I called her up. I says, why don't you give up your job and come with me? Come out to Marysville. 2, 3 other sergeants had done that. So she ditched her job, got a plane, and it took her about 4 days from Portland to Sacramento. And I went and picked her up in Sacramento. I met her in Sacramento. And we was there and went from Sacramento to Camp Beale. Then we hired a nice room that the natives provided for a fee, of course, like a motel. And we had a really nice place. This was in Riverside. And we stayed in Riverside.
In Washington State?
No, in California.
Okay.
And we stayed in Riverside there for, a month. And then the time came when we really had to get on a boat and leave. So she and Mary Green, which we are still friendly with, I am. They just sent me a card and a letter. And she and Mary Green worked their way back to Chicago. Then Gladys took a train from Chicago back to Maine.
So when she came from Portland, did she come by train?
Yes.
When you went from California, how did you travel to China?
We went to San Diego from Riverside. We was all packed and ready to go, and we took a ship, the U.S. escaped my mind, but it was a brand new ship, and we traveled alone. Usually ships travel in packs, in convoys, but this was a brand new ship, a little faster and more modern. So we was all non-commissioned officers and commissioned officers on that. There was 5,000 of us on that ship.
What does non-commissioned mean?
Pardon?
What does non-commissioned
That means that you're not an officer. You're an officer, but non-commissioned. When you get out of West Point, they say, I commission you a lieutenant so-and-so, then you become a commissioned officer. You're a captain, lieutenant, you're a lieutenant, captain, major, colonel, general, whatever. But as a non-commissioned officer, you're a corporal, sergeant, first sergeant, first class, etc.
So do you have to go to school like a West Point to be commissioned?
That's correct, yeah.
Where if you just went to the military and you go up in rank, then you're non-commissioned?
Yes, if you, some of us had chances to go to a 3-month, OCS they called it, Officers Training School.
Yeah.
And some of us chose not to go, some of them did. And, but on this ship, to, we went to Australia first.
What was that like?
We was just there. We weren't allowed off the ship, but we were able to. We was in. Now, the port escapes me right now, but we stopped in Australia. We crossed the date line, by the way, and if you had the date line is from one day to the next. And they used to initiate you. If you hadn't crossed it before, they'd initiate you or do different foolish things. And that was quite fun, but it was extremely hot on the way. And I wasn't a good sailor. But the first few days of the trip, I was sick as a dog. But then I got on my feet. But there's some that was sick from the time they embarked till the time they got off. They were sick, seasick. And we went from Australia to Bombay, India. And from Bombay to Calcutta. And we got off at Calcutta, and I think it was New Year's Eve. We'd been on the ocean for over a month, from San Diego to Australia to Bombay and Calcutta. And we stayed at a campsite there outside of, what was the name of that campsite? Kanchapara. And we stayed there waiting for transportation to go into China. And we was waiting for planes to go over the Himalayas. We stayed there a couple of weeks.
What was that like?
Well, we had time to rest, and it was pretty good. We went back to. We used to go to Bombay at night. They'd provide a truck, and we'd go there, and we rode through these little towns, and they smelled awful going through these towns. And come to find out, they used to take cow dung and mix it with straw and make patties out of it and stick it on the side of the house. And the sun would dry it out. And that's what they use as fuel. They'd burn that. It would burn readily. After it had dried out, the sun is extremely hot. And like I say, they cut up straw and took cow dung and made patties out of it, stuck it on the wall. You'd see the houses they were mud houses, mud brick houses, and they're all full of that fuel. And at night, you'd see them, they'd have little charcoal burners, and they'd feed that fuel into it and cook their supper. And as we rode through these little towns, the stench was wicked. And we used to go visit in Bombay, and we'd stay probably till 9, 10 o'clock, have a few beers, and look, just as tourists, go back to camp, and we entertain ourselves like that for a couple of weeks while we stay there. Then we took a plane over the Himalayas overnight into China, and that's the way there was no method of going in there without they take a plane load after plane load of us soldiers, fly us over the Himalayas, and which was quite a feat in those days because they're extremely high, and a lot of planes went down. A lot of planes went down, and they landed near Kun, Maine there, and brought us to Gunheiser.
And then where did you go from there?
After a year was up, the war was finished. I went to Shanghai, and that was high-class living there. The Army had taken over French quarters. There was no furniture, but those apartment houses, this is the first time I ever saw nice colored, I've never seen it in the United States, colored toilet facilities, toilets, and sinks, and bathtubs, and showers. And they had all of this.
You mean colored, not white?
Some of them were white, but all I'd ever seen was white stuff. But over there, they had the latest.
The what? The latest?
Yeah, the latest of everything.
Yeah.
But we took over those buildings to quarter the Army, and I was there a month in Shanghai, waiting for a ship to go to come back home.
What was that like?
That was high-class living. We used to get per diem. They'd give us, I think, $15 a day, each soldier. And we'd go and eat wherever we wanted to, at Chinese restaurants or mostly Chinese restaurants. And we could save a little money because the food was cheap and good.
Back in the States, you were making, what, $16 or $19 a week?
Back in the States then, I'd lost all track. This was in 1944, 45.
Yeah.
And I'd lost track of what, but before I'd gone, I was making $25 a week. One week I'd make 32 because I worked overtime. I worked Saturday, which they considered overtime, but it was for my benefit. I'd work that Saturday so that I'd come back home a day sooner and have a day extra at home. So I got a day. I used to get $32 a week that week and $25 the next.
And when you were in Shanghai, what did you do?
Nothing really. We just ogled the girls and just we visited. We were like tourists. We had right in the middle of Shanghai. This other sergeant and myself was walking down, and we saw an English sign, a Japanese sign, and there they had a whole beautiful cattle, and right in the middle of Shanghai, mind you, and those cows never went out of the barn, and they were big, beautiful cows. I'd never seen anything quite like it in the States, but those cows never went out. They were fed in the barn, they were milked in the barn, and they went out once a day with their Chinese handler, walking around for exercise. Then they were brought back in. Then they went out to pasture, but that was their milk supply. That they produced milk there.
What were the buildings like?
The buildings? A long shed. You mean where the cattle were?
No, in the whole city.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful.
How tall was the tallest building?
It didn't go, but they had some really handsome looking buildings at the time.
Did they have Thai buildings?
Oh, yes. Yes, I think that this French apartment building where we were, and there was also, we lived
in the French community, there was also a Russian community where the Russians stayed, international village, in other words, and they tended to stick to their own, you know, the English in one area, the French in another, Italians in another. It was quite an arrangement.
Who had the tallest building?
Oh, I wouldn't know.
Did they, I mean, what?
But where we were, see, we went to a hotel for a drink one time, right in the middle of the city, practically. And there was a big racetrack there. And they had fine horses from Japan. The Japanese, by the way, were still there, but they were unarmed. Before we got there, they'd been disarmed.
Do you remember when the bomb was dropped?
Oh, in August sometimes.
Do you remember how you heard about it?
Yes. They said Truman dropped the atomic weapon. We knew that this was due to come. And he dropped it on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and that was the end of within days. I think Hiroshima was the first, and then Nagasaki, and they killed 90,000 in Hiroshima alone.
How many people were killed in the war, do you know?
In the American, on the American side, I would say about 250,000. I wouldn't be too far wrong. Not counting this is killed. There's people that were crippled and incapacitated. I don't know how many, but about 250,000. That's pretty close.
And what were the roads paved in Shanghai?
Oh, yeah, I guess. Yeah, they had rickshaws there and taxis, and fortunately, we had a Jeep. And this sergeant that I bunked with came back one day, and he says, "Boy, I'd like to be going home on the ship that's in the harbor now." I said, "What is it?" And he told me the name of a ship, the St. Paul, USS St. Paul. I said, "Jesus," I said, "my nephew is on that ship." And we jumped in a Jeep and went down to the dock, and we says, "Is Nordell Guyton on this ship?" And the officer of the day there says, "Yes, we have a Nordell Guyton. Would you get him?" And they went after Nordell, and there was his dad. And his father. And we said, can he come out tonight? Can he come out this afternoon with us? Sure. So Nordell went back and changed up, and we took him out for supper. And just a few days after that, my own ship, the one that I came home on, came in, the USS Arcturus. It was not a very nice ship, but it got us home. And we could only have 2 meals a day on it, but which was more than sufficient. They didn't have facilities to feed as many, but we was all in a hurry. We landed, I'll never forget. I got up in the morning, I says, "Where are we?" "Well, we're pretty close to the Puget Sound," they said.
Wow.
And did you ever go there?
Yeah.
And sure enough, we come down the Puget Sound, chug, 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 chug. It was the most beautiful sight I ever saw. It was
just at daybreak, and there was housing on both sides of the sound there, and we come down. I felt pretty good about coming down there, and we stayed in Seattle there. For probably a couple of weeks. But the first night, I got to tell you this. We went to a restaurant, this other sergeant and myself, and we ordered a steak, and we says, bring us each a quart of milk. And they brought us a quart of milk. We had a real desire for milk. I did. And so this other guy, which is unusual because usually we're supposed to be drinkers of hard liquor, but I wanted milk. We ate our steak and drank our quart of milk, and the girl came over and said, anything else? No. How much is it? She says, that gentleman at the end of the bar paid for everything. We looked over there, and that fellow says, an elderly man, and he'd seen us eating away then and figured, you see us with 2 quarts of milk on the table. He says, those guys must be, well, it was a known port for incoming soldiers. And he paid for our meal. So I thought that was quite nice.
Do you remember when Nordell first saw you? Was Nordell surprised to see you in Shanghai?
Yeah, of course. I guess he must have been as surprised as we were. But they had come in there to refuel. His ship was not a destroyer, a cruiser. And they'd been, I think that they'd been in, I don't know if they'd been in battle but they came into Shanghai. And fortunately, this other sergeant says, I'd like to be going home on that ship. I said, boy, that's my nephew's on that. I knew a little of my sister had written me, he was on the St. Paul. And we had a day's visit. We rode rickshaws all over town, all over Shanghai. Then we brought him back, and I guess we shipped out just a few days after.
How old was he then?
Oh, he must have been 18, 19. He had joined before his, I guess he was about 17. And he'd stayed in for a while. He must have been 18, 19 years old. But he looked like a youngster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, did you have children before you went?
No, I didn't. When I came back home, we produced one son.
And back to Rumford. What were the streets paved with in Rumford?
Well, this is when I was about 8 or 9, 7 or 8, 9. They used to put coal ashes in the streets at mud time there. The Oxford Paper Company used to burn coal, and now they burn oil. But at the time, coal was their method of generating electricity. They'd use, and they wanted to get rid of the coal ashes, so the town of Rumford would pave these outlying areas. I don't mean to say not the main drag in town, but the outskirts of Rumford there, they used to put coal ashes down on the streets.
What was that like?
Now, I used to run barefooted through that like no problem at all. Now, if I take off my shoes and walk across the floor, it hurts my feet. Not really, but I can, coal ashes, during mud time, that is, they'd come there with a team of horses and a load of coal ashes, dump it in the street, grade it, and it'd be rather than use gravel. And then after a few years, I guess they gravelled it and tarred it, and it's tarred now, I know.
Did the cars get stuck in the ashes?
Did I do what?
Did cars get stuck in the ashes? Was it like mud?
It was like mud. In fact, we helped it make mud, and to watch the cars get stuck. We had a small horse at the time, and quite often a car would get stuck in the front there, and they'd come in to the house and say, "Could you pull us out with your horse?" But he was really not a working horse, but he was big enough that he could just give the car enough of a help to pull. So my brother and I would make 25, 50 cents a piece for the cars that were stuck there. But that happened in the springtime during the mud time.
Now, did you have running water at that house?
Yes, we did. Running water, and we had a stove with we had a stove with the tank inside of the bathroom, a galvanized tank. So we had a good supply of hot water. That is, when the stove was running, it was piped from the stove to the bathroom, and we had a bathtub, and quite modern. We had running water and a toilet and all the fixings. We still not. We had electric lights.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had electric lights, and but this was on the outskirts in Rumford, on the outskirts of town, and he had built at the time when in the early 20s there, when lights were becoming available, and bathtubs and stuff like that, and when we moved from the farm to Stratford Avenue. Well, we didn't move from the farm to Stratford. We moved from the farm to a place what they call Virginia, and lived in an apartment house. Therefore, up until he finished building this house, then that's when we made our move. Yeah.
What's the most memorable moment of your life?
Now that's. What can I?
That's a hard question.
Yeah, that's a you really. I really don't know. I can't say the day that I got married because.
The day your son was born?
Possibly, yes. In fact, I was so excited about it that my sisters used to come and see at the hospital to see him, and they every once in a while, about every couple of hours or so, they would pick up the babies and show them through the glass to the parents. And my sisters would come to see the baby, and I'd be in the hallway and acting as a traffic cop. Acting as a traffic cop, they say, and I'd say, "Hurry up! He's being shown," and I was pretty excited about it. Yeah, I was pretty excited about that youngster. I can remember taking him. We had a car at the time, and he was just a small baby, and we'd take him where I live now, Montola Heights, and we'd hold him up in the air. This was farmland, and it was supposed to be purer air there than in the city. So we'd hold him up in the air like this so he'd get good fresh air. That was kind of silly, but we did it.
How did you pick his name?
How did we pick his name? My wife says she wanted a seer, but I'd had so much trouble with that name. People asking me, is that your first or your last name? And I would tell them that's my first name. So I said, I'm not going to put that kid through that same thing. So she called him Seer William Fraser. same as I. So when I come home from work that day, I'd been at work, and they stayed in the hospital 2-3 days at a time at that time. And I went to visit with the baby and her. And she said, I named the baby today. I said, what'd you name him? She said, Sear. I said, no, you didn't. And I said, no, I'm going down to the office right now, the desk, and change. So I went down there. I said, is it too late to change that baby's name? This, of course not. I said, well, you call him Douglas Sear Fraser. But she liked Sear because it was unique, and there were not too many. But I didn't. I'm not crazy about it today. But
how'd you pick Douglas?
well, that seemed to rhyme pretty well with Douglas. I think is Scotch.
Yeah.
Quite a lot of, and my ancestry is Scotch.
Okay.
So I thought that Douglas rhymed. We had discussed Douglas before.
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty good, not a bad name. So he's dubbed Douglas Sear today.
And with that,
You going to bed, dear? No, you're just giving me a bonus. Yeah, that's all. Oh, let me smell you, dear.
one more bonus. Give him a kiss.
Oh, I can smell you. Yeah, she smells good. Can I have a kiss? Ah,
Give Uncle Sear a kiss.
yeah,
Give him a kiss.
yeah.
Give me a kiss.
No kiss. A hug. Ah, okay, a hug. Yeah.